Good morning, friends of Room 8. Analyzing data is very important to the study of economics. So in this lesson, we are going to take a look at calculating measures of central tendency. So we're going to calculate a mean average, we're going to calculate the median, and the mode of a data set. So step number one is that we need to get our data set. And so everything is stored over on Student Drive B. And so the way you access that is to identify on your desktop the computer, open that window up, and look for Student Drive B. Navigate over to the current year. Look through the list of folders looking for classes. And here is our Period 4 Economics. Head over to Chapter 1. And we are going to use mean, median, and mode lesson. And so you want to open that up. And once that's open, you want to go ahead and save a copy of this to your Dropbox. File. Save as. And you go ahead and navigate over to your Dropbox, and then you should have these somehow organized, hopefully by your senior or junior year, and then go ahead and save that, and then we'll move on from that point. So if you want to go ahead and pause the video and get that taken care of, then we'll get back to the lesson. So here is our worksheet. Go ahead and put your name. And then we'll take a look at some of these categories here. All of our good people listed by first name. And in this lesson, we're just going to focus on housing cost. And then later on, in the next lesson, future lesson, we'll take a look at maybe a birth month and test scores. Here's some annual income and age. So the data we're going to take a look at here is housing cost. One of the important measures of the economy is pay attention to housing prices throughout the country in different locations within states. And so step number one, let's go ahead and format this data. This is obviously is going to be dollars. And so the way to format these as dollars, quick way to do it is go ahead and put a selection around all those values. And then a shortcut to the currency format or accounting format would be to click the dollar sign. And then you have something that looks like that. It's a bit busy. Don't really like looking at that. You could clean this up by reducing the decimal places. We're not going to be concerned with that. And that happens right here with the decrease decimal tool. Click that a couple times, and then we get something that looks a little less busy. Really don't have to have the dollar signs on there because it's just obvious that we're dealing with dollars here in this classroom. And so if you want to change that and just get rid of those dollar signs, we could just go with a real general format and insert some commas. And so we can click right here on the number format tool and click general for no specific format, and then come in and insert some commas to make it easier to read. And then once again, you can get rid of decimal places. So go ahead if you want, pause the video, get that taken care of, and ask any questions that you may have, and then we'll move on. So let's analyze these housing values. For this lesson, we will just focus on the average mean and the median. Now, I say the word average mean because a lot of times other classes or throughout your K-12 career, you've probably heard calculate an average. And so when you hear that, it's assumed to calculate the mean average. But there are other types of averages, or what we call measures of central tendency, and that is, what does the data tend to do? Does it cluster or group around a center value? And so the mean is one you're familiar with, and that's where you would add up all of these values, the sum of these values, and then divide it by the number of values that are actually located within that data set. So Excel has a function that we can use to streamline that calculation. And so it works like this. Here's our average mean, and we're going to put our answer right underneath this data set for housing costs. So we begin all formulas in Excel, or all calculations, with an equal sign. And so to calculate the average, we just simply type average. Type the word average, parenthesis, and then we can select with the mouse, select a range of cells. You see those marching ants putting that selection frame around our data. And so everything within this range of data, cells C5, through, that's what the colon means, through C23, column C, row 23. You can close that with the right paren. And then we can either press enter or click this check mark to accept that formula. And there is our mean average value for this set of data. Well, let's calculate a median value. Now, median value is the actual middle value of this particular data set. So meaning that whatever we calculate for the median, half the values will be above that number and half the values will be below that number. We calculate that with the equal sign, median. We're going to enclose that range of data within parentheses, exactly the same way we calculated the average. And so there you go. There is our median value, $65,000. So we take a look at these two values, and so in this particular data set, I've exaggerated a couple of values, which does mirror the reality of housing prices across the country. And so you can see that you get two real different values here. Zoom in a little bit here. There's a big difference between $178,000 and $65,000. So the question is, which one's the better measure? Well, for our purposes in economics, and for this particular data for housing, we're interested in the median housing value. Why would that be? The reason is because it more accurately represents the typical cost of houses within this particular range. And the main reason that is because you have these values that are extreme values, or they vary from what most of the other values show. So what we have here is something that we call outliers, values that are beyond the normal for this particular data set. And so there's a couple of them. There's the 500,000 here. And so you can see most of the values here are under 100,000. There's a few that are over, and then there's one that's really extreme, which is this for Cameron here, this $1,650,000 value. So what it does to the data set is what we call it skews the data. It puts a lot of influence on the mean average, and so tends to inflate or increase what appears to be the typical value of a house. And so in this data set, it is not accurate to say that the typical value of this set of data is $178,000. There's really very few houses that are close to that amount. So it's influenced by this giant number. In fact, you could experiment with this, and let's say that Cameron's house is actually $2,650,000. I'll change that to a 2. And then take a look at what happens here. So our median stays the same, but look what happens to the mean average here. It's really going up because it's really influenced by this particular outlier, and you could keep experimenting with that and seeing what's happening there. And our median stays the same because the median is the middle value. Half the values are above this number and half the values are below that number. So in the world of economics and in the study of housing prices across the country, we always look at the median housing price. So let's say that you finish college and you're going to go and look for a new place to live, and you start looking at different cities across the country. Well, it's going to be important that you pay attention to the median housing value. That's the one that's going to make the most sense to you. You would know that it's the middle value, and once again, half of all the housing prices are above that number and half are below it. So median is a particular type of measure of central tendency that is frequently used in the study of economics.